Hola, Senor YouTube. Let me get this out of the way. First of all, I was wanting to continue the reading like last week, but I wasn't able to, and the reason why I didn't do it any time last week during vacation was due to the fact that I was on a mission trip. If anyone wants to know more about that, I don't know, maybe I can do a video answering some questions. I'll decide that later. In any case, I have some reading that is overdue, I believe. So why don't we get started? Chapter 18. Winstrick slept through the afternoon and awoke at midnight. She had formulated a plan after yesterday's battle, anticipating a stronger push in the air from the Griffins the next day. Together with the Firewings and those Cloudsdale ponies who were still uninjured, she had flown the sky throughout the morning gathering clouds. They were ready now for whatever the Griffins could throw at them. They had cooked up a storm unlike any they had come down to the plains for decades. It was a huge rain cloud, with enough water to turn the ground to mud and bog down the Griffin invasion for days. She had waited only for Celerity's order. Celerity's forces on the ground were prepared as well, rested, and ready to fight again. She had rotated the line out through the night, make sure that the bridge was full of ponies to guard against any treachery from the invaders. They were emboldened by the success of yesterday's defense. The Griffins no longer seemed unbeatable. Their numbers meant nothing on the bridge, and with the Firewing to hold the air, the ponies had a real chance to stop the invasion before it could truly begin. The attack came at dawn. Down on the bridge, the Griffin infantry surged up from the south, funneling into the kill zone. The spear ponies were ready for them, waiting with their weapons pointed over the shield wall. The Griffins crashed against them once again, in a repeat of yesterday's attack. The ponies repulsed them again, driving their spears into the mob. Above the battle, Winstrick and the air forces took to the skies, prepared for the Griffins to come screaming up at them. But to their surprise, they remained unchallenged. No Griffins left the ground. The Firewings and Cloudsdale Pigsty hung in the air, puzzled. On the bridge, the slaughter continued. At times, the Griffins threatened to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers, but the Earth Ponies held their ground. The corpses of the base Griffins' infantry littered the bridge, creating a hideous tableau of war. Behind the lines, Celerity frowned. This wasn't like Shrikefeather. She'd studied his campaigns in the south over the last 100 years. He was smarter than this. Why would he keep sending his troops to die against her wall? The only thing he could accomplish was to tire out her men. Which might be the point. Celerity had a sudden paranoid suspicion. The frontliners were due to begin changing out in 5 minutes. If Shrikefeather was thinking along the same lines that she was now. Reinforcements to the front. Now, I want that line shored up immediately. Celerity's voice carried over the racket of battle, magically amplified. Ponies struggled through the mass of soldiers on the bridge, trying to reach the front to aid their kinsmen. Celerity watched their bated breath, waiting for Shrikefeather to make his move. The shrieks of dying Griffins carried over the bridge, and the smell of blood and smoke filled the air. Wait, smoke? Celerity turned to look back to the north, and nearly had a heart attack. The camp was on fire. Great columns of smoke were rising up from the rear, drifting in the wind. She stared aghast as the flames consumed the tents, leaping into the air. Behind her came a great shout. Returning her vision to the bridge, she witnessed the line of the Griffins fold back on itself, and from the ranks of their infantry strode the maulers. They were fearsome Griffins, clad in full plate armor, with huge maces held in their hands. They carried no shields, and they were too heavy to fly, for they only had one purpose: to crush their way through the enemy before he could even attack. They were massive, twice the height of a pony, whirling their weapons around to pick up momentum. They charged against the wall of ponies, who were already spent up from nearly 30 minutes of fighting. The spears were smashed aside, and the great maces crashed into the shield wall. Wood broke, and shields shattered. Splinters flew through the air, followed up by the unfortunate soldiers who felt the maulers' crushing blows. Winstrick heard the cry from one of the Cloudsdale ponies. "Look, the camp!" Heads turned all across the sky, looking down at the fire that was rapidly spreading out of control. Winstrick called out to her troops. "Every pony, hurry, break off the storm, we're changing tactics. Use the cloud to put out the fire, save the food supplies." In the skies, thousands of Pigsty beat their wings north to the huge storm they had prepared the night before. They had planned to use it to disrupt the Griffin's air units, but they needed it for a more pressing purpose now. Each Pegasus flew into the cloud, grabbed a chunk, and zoomed back toward the camp. Windstreak reached inside and wrapped her teeth around a particularly fluffy cloudlet, then raced off. By the time they had returned to the camp, the fire had completely consumed the Westerman tents. If it destroyed the food supplies, the Equestrians would be forced to retreat north. There was no way they could hold out long enough to get enough food to feed the army from Whitetail. The journey was nearly a week long on hoof and dragging heavy carts. If they lost the supplies, the battle would soon follow. Windstreak smeared the edge of the inferno. The air was blisteringly hot, but it made flying easy. She could ride the thermal, saving her energy for the dowsing purpose. It had been a while since she'd done any serious weather forging, but she still remembered the basics. Positioning her cloud above one of the tents, she bucked hard and cracked her hooves into it. Rain poured out, falling into the blaze. She braced for a second kick, when suddenly something hit her from the side. She found herself grappling with a griffin, a great black-feathered and helmeted thing. It shrieked in her ears, slashed at her with the blades on its claw. Her hoof was pinned to her sides, and her wings were trapped by the griffin's tail. Windstreak used the only weapon available and bashed her helmet into the griffin's beak. It was stunned, and they fell locked together towards the fire. They crashed through the roof of the burning tent, bringing down the entire structure. Windstreak felt like she was in an oven, the blistering heat threatening to overwhelm her. The griffin in front of her stood, roaring at her. How had a griffin gone this far behind their lines? She tried to fly away, to get out of the heat, but the griffin flew after her, sinking its talons into her armor. The sharp battle claws dug deep, catching in the metal. She bucked at the griffin, kicking it in the head, but it just roared again. She couldn't fly. She couldn't get out. The fire was everywhere. A golden streak rocketed from A golden streak rocketed in from the smoke. Bergeron plunged into the fire, knocking the griffin away. "Come on, Captain," he shouted, taking flight. "Let's get out of here." The two of them raced upward, trying to escape the blaze. The griffin came after them, still trying for blood. His claws had rent Windstreak's armor open in the back, and it was difficult to fly. The ruined armor kept obstructing her wing movement. She flapped frantically, trying to get some distance. "Bergeron! Split loop!" The other Pegasus nodded, breaking off his flight and looping to the left. Windstreak went right, soaring around. The griffin chose to go after her, hoping to finish out the pony he'd already weakened. She pulled an incredibly tight turn, and the griffin stayed with her. He was so concentrated on staying on her tail that he missed Bergeron streaking in from the other side of the circle he and Windstreak had created. Bergeron smashed into the griffin head-on, driving his armored hoof straight into the griffin's face and shattering its beak. The griffin went limp and fell back into the smoke. Bergeron flew up to his captain. "Are you alright, ma'am?" he shouted over the roar of the fire. "I need to get my armor off." Windstreak took off for the sky, with Bergeron close behind. They pulled away from the smoke, flying upward. "Where did he come from?" demanded Windstreak. "I'm not sure. They haven't lifted any troops off all day." But Windstreak soon realized the truth. As they flew, she looked around at the Pegasi, still trying to quench the fire. From the smoke, griffins were emerging and attacking, catching the ponies by surprise. Dozens had already fallen, and the fires continued to rage out of control. She now knew the cause of the flames and the lack of resistance in the skies today. The griffins had flown wide around the ponies during the night, going far abroad to avoid the patrols of Pegasi. Snaking on the ground under cover of darkness, they had infiltrated the camp while the attack at the bridge began, and set fire to the tents. On the ground, Solaria was frantically ordering those ponies not immediately engaged with defending the bridge to gather water from the river and bring it back to camp. Using buckets, helmets, and whatever else they could scrounge up, the soldiers of Whitetail found themselves acting as impromptu firefighters. The situation on the bridge was dire, as the Maulers continued smashing their way through the pony lines. So far, they had been repelled by a swift response from the reinforcing spear ponies, who quickly brought their weapons to bear against the brutish griffins. But they were paying for every foot of the bridge with dozens of ponies, feeding bodies to the meat grinder of Mauler maces, and the line was falling back. And now, she had another problem. From across the river, flights of griffins were lifting into the air, carrying large sacks in their claws. They flew over the river, heading toward the bridge from the east and west. Solaria roared angrily. "Where is my air support?" She looked back at the camp, now half consumed in the fire. The Pegasi were trying to put out the flames using clouds, but somehow a massive force of Griffin commandos had sneaked in behind her lines, and they were ambushing the Clydesdale ponies. How the hell had this slipped past her? She'd been terribly mistaken. Strikefeather was much smarter than she'd given him credit for. The Griffin attack wings opened their sacks. They withdrew small, black spheres and began flying over the bridge and throwing them down at the ponies below. The primitive firebombs exploded on impact, devastating the Wisterman ponies. Great holes appeared in the line, and white trail troops surged into the breaches to stop up the gaps. The slaughter had turned the other way, and dozens of her troops fell as every minute passed. Above the camp, Winstreak struggled with the clasp of her armor. The heat had fused the soft gold clip with the chain, and she couldn't get off. "Bertrand, help me!" Her lieutenant was instantly at her side, grabbing the offending chain and pulling as hard as he could. Together, they put enough force on it to break the link, and Winstreak struggled out of her breastplate. It fell to the ground far below. She flapped her wings comfortably again, no longer protected, but back to full flying capability. "Look!" Bertrand pointed to the south, where the ponies of the bridge found themselves besieged from the air. "We have to keep the skies clear." Winstreak flew back towards the Inferno, where the Pegasi had begun to fight back against the Griffins. They clashed into smoke, hooves and claws drawing blood and breaking bone. The Griffins would latch onto the ponies and drag them down into the fire, sacrificing themselves to destroy their enemies. It was the mark of an insane elite group, indoctrined and shaped for one purpose: the destruction of the air forces of Equestria. Winstreak didn't know who these Griffins were, but it was clear that they had to be stopped. Even more important was the bridge. The line had faltered. The Griffins had nearly pushed the ponies off to the other side. The firebombs were shattering their ranks, breaking the formations apart. Celerity, in the midst of the chaos, reacted as quickly as she could. The fire wings of the Clydesdale Pegasi were busy in the rear of the camp, and she had no flyers to take out the bombers. So she did the next best thing. "Mages!" Celerity's magically amplified voice boomed over the battle. "I need every unicorn at the line. Take out the flyers!" Spells flew through the air, lightning crackles and fireballs searing the sky. The Griffins retaliated, some abandoning the bridge to drop their firebombs on the unicorns. When the Griffins fell, their entire stockpile would detonate, blasting a huge hole in the ground and sending any pony unlucky enough to be caught in the explosion flying. Winstreak dashed after every golden armor pony she could find. "Firewings, we must defend the bridge!" They slowly left the fight below, leaving the Clydesdale Pegasi to fight against the Griffins. Some still flew clouds over the campsite, trying to douse the flames. The flames had completely destroyed Westerman's camp, and had spread to Whitetails. Lines from river ferried buckets to water to the fire, and the ponies struggled to keep the blaze under control. The firewings pulled away from the camp, returning to the river. The huge fight of the remaining 300 elite Pegasi swooped into the fray. The firebomb squads were not armed for an area of battle, and were ill-suited to face the best fighters in Equestria. The firewings straight down like avenging angels, ripping apart the bombing wings. Cheers went up from below. "Mages, I want spells on the bridge now! Take out those maulers!" Celerity's face was lined with tension, but inside she smiled. "Not today, Strikefeather." The unicorns blasted the maulers with thunderous spells. Magic exploded across the bridge, blowing away chunks of stone. Griffins tumbled through the air into the river. The whitetail troops poured onto the bridge, wielding their hoofmates and trampling over the maulers. Slowly, the tide was turning, but the camp was a disaster. The Clydesdale ponies were unable to fight both the fires and the Griffins. They fell by the score, bodies raining down into the fires. The Griffins were slaughtering them wholesale, their sharp talons more than a match for the unarmored Pegasi. Winstreak and Bergeron swooped through the smoke, searching for the leader of the commandos. "He's probably the biggest one," coughed Winstreak, choking in the ash. All around them, Pegasi and Griffins tangled in midair, and the sound of thunderclaps boomed incessantly. "There! The big black one!" Bergeron put as much power behind his wings as he could muster. Winstreak followed him closely. They streaked towards the huge Griffin and his guards, two other hulking brutes. He saw them coming and vanished into the smoke. His guards flew up to confront the firewings. "Go for the one on the right," shouted Winstreak, and they dived into battle. They both collided with the Griffin. Winstreak driving it to his stomach and Bergeron into his head. The 1-2 punch shattered the guard's spine, and it flopped limply in midair as it began to long fall toward the ground. The other dived into Bergeron, locking his claws around his neck. "Go! Get the captain, I'll deal with this." Bergeron shot the hoof into the guard's face, trying to push it away. Winstreak moved to help, but Bergeron shook his head. "You're going to lose him. Go! I'll be fine." Winstreak nodded to her lieutenant and blasted off into the smoke. The cloud was dark and burned her eyes, but Winstreak had flown through worse. She listened for the telltale mix of roars and bird screams that constituted the Griffin language. She burst out of the smoke suddenly, finding herself on the edge of the camp. In front of her, a Cloudsdale Pegasus was flying around the Griffin commando, deftly evading his claws. Another Pegasus, unseen by the Griffin, had dragged a cloud above them. She bucked it hard and a lightning bolt reached the air. It struck the Griffin full on, frying it instantly and fusing its helmet to its head. The Griffin fell without a sound. Winstreak turned back into the smoke. "Cut off the head, and the body will die." She had to find the Griffin captain. There! A dark shape in the ash, black on black. She soared after it, coming out of the cloud and diving into the form. Captain Withers was a huge Griffin, one of the largest of his kind. Each of his claws was large enough to crush a pony's head inside, and he was monstrously strong. He grabbed for Winstreak, trying to snatch her neck and bring the battle to a swift end. She dodged deftly, swooping underneath him. His tail lashed out, catching her in the face and sending her flying aside. He swooped after her, roaring in broken equestrian. Oh wow. "You are mine, pony!" "Come and get me!" Winstreak vaulted away from the Griffin, doing an aerial somersault and bashing into him with her hooves. The Griffin didn't even flinch, bringing his huge claws down to rip her in half. She rolled away, flapping her wings. The Griffin's eyes were red gleams of light beneath his helmet, little beady orbs that glared at Winstreak with murderous intent. He flared his wings and came after her, shooting through the air like a force of nature. Force of nature. But her name wasn't Winstreak for nothing. She zipped away, daring him to follow her. He pursued, giving chase to the infuriating Pegasus that had thwarted his commando's every move. She took him on a wild flight, diving into the smoke and out again. She flew low into the inferno. She crashed through one of the burning tents, plunging out of the other side. He dodged the wreckage as the tent collapsed, sending up another plume of ash into his face. He snarled, blinking it away. He followed her through the fire, the smoke, and the open air. Winstreak led him around the campsite, carefully watching her position. She dived into another cloud. He followed, his great wing bait sounding like a war drum. "You cannot escape me, pony." "I'm not trying to," shouted Winstreak. She flew out of the cloud and turned her head to see it explode behind her as the Griffin captain blasted out of it. He roared again, and Winstreak yelled, "Now!" The Griffin had just enough time to look down and see that the Pegasus had drawn him all the way south over the main force of ponies, before the unicorns below sent enough magic his way to kill 30 Griffins. Fireballs, lightning bolts, and blades of wind smashed into Captain Withers, obliterating him completely. Sounds like fun. Winstreak sighed with exhausted relief. As she pulled out wide around the campsite, she could see in the distance the Griffins retreating from the bridge. The line held. Below, the fires of the camp were slowly coming under control. With their leader dead, the directionless commando soon fell to the firewings and the Cloudsdale Pegasi. She landed next to Celerity, who had shouted herself hoarse throughout the long battle. She trotted wearily up to the Duchess. "The day is ours, ma'am." Celerity gave her a broad smile. "We did it. We beat the bastards back. Thanks to you and the rest of the firewings." "Is it over then?" "For today. Shrikefeather won't try again so soon after a beating that bad." Celerity laughed, a hollow, tired sound. "We'll need a miracle to break through this time." She looked exhausted. "Duchess, perhaps you should get some rest." "Later," said Celerity. "I need to check on the food supplies and get an accounting of our losses. The damage report should be done by the end of tonight." She sighed wearily. "We can't take much more of this, but Shrikefeather's army isn't infinite. If he overruns the cost in horse or Griffin power that he's willing to lose, he'll pull back. The Griffins would rather try for another spot on the river than continue throwing troops away against us." She frowned. "If worse comes to worse, we'll destroy the bridge, but Shrikefeather cannot be allowed to have it." Winstreak nodded, tired from the fight. "Goodbye for now, Duchess. I need to speak with the Fire Wings. She lifted off and began scanning for the gold that signified a member of her unit. There they were. They had formed a small group on the edge of the campsite, where the Cloudsdale Pegasi were now extinguishing the last of the fires. She swooped in, landing next to her fellow ponies. Bergeron! Is Bergeron here? Is he alright? I'm here, Captain. Bergeron broke through the ranks. He was missing his helmet, and he'd acquired a wicked slash across his face. It was no longer bleeding, but it was clearly causing him a great deal of pain. Bergeron! Thank the sisters you made it. Whispery felt glad for the first time that day. Why aren't you in the infirmary? You need to get that wound treated. He shook his head. After my report, Captain. Quickly then. You shouldn't endanger yourself like this. He laughed. It's not as bad as it looks, trust me. He winced. Well, at least I think so. Bergeron. Right. We pushed them back. Any Griffin commandos that escaped have fled across the river. We've cleared out most of them. We figured there were about 300 or 400 of them. How they managed to sneak into a camp I'll never know, but they sure did a lot of damage. Any report on that? Westerman's camp is completely torched. All their supplies and sleeping quarters are gone. But they'll be able to share Whitetail's... they'll be able to share Whitetail's. There were a lot of empty sleeping pallets at the bow of the bridge today. They were both silent for a moment. Food? Thankfully, they missed the main grain stores. We'll not be going hungry. Westry gave a relieved breath. What were our losses? Bergeron was grim. Too many. We lost around 300 from the Cloudsdale units to the Griffins. Nearly 100 more died trying to put out the fires. On the bridge, the Westerminers took a beating. No firm numbers on the casualties yet, but at least 400 of them. It was a complete massacre. As for the Firewings, we lost some good ponies today. Ingrid, Genevieve, Derek, Gerald. Nearly 4 dozen all told. Winstry felt the euphoria of their victory drain away. Several others were injured severely. About... Hold on, stupid scene message. Okay then, now, let's see, where was I? Alright. Nearly 4 dozen all told. Winstry felt the euphoria of their victory drain away. Several others were severely injured. About 30 are in the infirmary with serious burns. Some are expected to survive. 52 with non-serious injuries. We took a beating out there today, Captain. They did their duty, Bergeron. We won't forget them. I know, ma'am. Get to the infirmary and get that wound looked at. I doubt they'll have time, Captain. The nurse ponies are overloaded as is. That's an order, Lieutenant. Yes, ma'am. The sky was as blood red as the sun disappeared over the... I said that wrong. The sky was blood red as the sun disappeared over the western horizon. General Shrikefeather was furious. Explain to me again how a bunch of untrained weather ponies managed to defeat the best aerial strike force in my army. Sir, stammered the lieutenant, they were outnumbered almost 5 to 1. It's their job to be outnumbered. If I can't trust my commander to be bloody commandos, then how am I supposed to do my job? Sir, Captain Withers was certain they could accomplish the mission. Captain Withers was an imbecile. He has already paid for his mistakes with his life. Pray you don't do the same. Sir, squeaked the lieutenant, we dealt the ponies a heavy blow today. They don't have nearly our numbers. If the battle tomorrow goes as badly for them as today's, then... You feather-brained idiot! They won today. Don't pretend any differently. We can't keep throwing troops away against Larry's damn bridge line, he snarled. It's those Pegasi in the golden armor. They're the ones who smashed the firebombing teams to bits. They're the ones who organized the Cloudsdale Pegasi into the weather teams to put out the fires. We need to break them, swiftly and decisively. The lieutenant nervously shifted his balance. Sir, there's always a backup plan. The general narrowed his eyes and put his claw to his beak. He'd hoped to avoid playing that card so soon in the campaign, but it was beginning to seem like the most expedient option. How long? By noon tomorrow at the earliest. Most likely not until later in the day. just barely fast enough to fit into our timetable. Very well. We'll push tomorrow to keep them on their toes. Have the aerial units hold back. I don't want to waste any more time on them than necessary. I don't want to waste any more than the necessary. Very well, General Sir. And then, on Monday, we'll put the backup into motion, he sneered. I always enjoy starting the week off on a high note. Let's see, hold on. I had to continue that, so, hold on. Need to see. So, chapter 19, here we are. Alright. Back to Rye. Rye, Inger, and Cranberry ran through the tunnels, desperately searching for a way out. The smooth walls offered no escape, only tiny holes through which poured more of the insect things. The corridor twisted and turned, and soon they were hopelessly lost inside. The chamber lay far behind them, lost in the blackness. With no other options, they fled deeper into the unknown, every step taking them deeper into the lair of the creatures. Eventually, too tired to continue running, they slowed to a stop, and tried to catch their breath. Rye's horn still emitted a dim orange glow, but all they could see was an amber resin that coated everything. I don't think they're following us anymore, said Inger between the gasps of air. I haven't heard that sound they make for a while, said Cranberry. Rye shook his head. We can't stop for long. They hunt using vibrations. Our little charge can't have gone unnoticed. They might be drawing back for now, but they'll come after us in a force again soon enough. He gulped, gripped by a new unpleasant paranoia. Or maybe they're waiting for us up ahead. I have no idea they're smart enough to lay a trap. What are they, anyway? I've never read about anything like them. No clue, Cranberry. They jumped you both while you were in the woods and dragged you off. I came back just in time to follow. Wait, said Inger, a hint of anger in his voice. You came back? You were supposed to be on watch. I know, said Rye, mortified. I was experimenting. He looked at the floor, avoiding their eyes. With the magic. Inger was filled with fury for a moment, but he saw Rye's absolute dejection and it drained away. I'm sorry. I know you were whole. You have no idea. Rye's eyes were filled with hunger. There was so much power. I've never been able to lift a toothbrush before, let alone a tree. I was able to do anything. Cranberry said quietly, But you left it, to come after us. Yes. Rye didn't say anything else. Thank you, she smiled at him. Winstreak would be proud. Inger's eyes twitched. Winstreak? Winstreak Firemane? Cranberry nodded, delighted. Oh yes, well, that's her maiden name. She's called Winstreak Strudel now. She's Rye's mother. Bum bum bum. Inger stared at Rye, his eyes wide. Inside, Rye felt disappointment welling up. He'd hoped to be judged by Inger at least on his own merits. But now, on top of being a Pegacorn, the Pegasus would be sure to think of his mother every time he looked up at Rye. And how could he hope to measure up to Inger's self-professed idol? Slowly, the Red Pegasus said, Then I guess I owe the Strudel family my life twice over. He looked Rye squarely in the eyes and smiled. Thank you, Rye. I'm glad to call you my friend. Rye managed not to choke in surprise, and smiled uncertainly. Even though I'm a Pegacorn? Inger nodded, having the grace to look ashamed. I'm sorry. I made some hasty judgments about you. Your disabilities do not define you. He gritted his teeth as though the words were being pulled out of him with pliers. Will you accept my apology? Rye raised an eyebrow and snarled. This isn't just because I saved your tail feathered back there, is it? Don't be an ass, Rye. Inger gave him a look. Rye smirked. Then yes, apology accepted. Glad to be with you, Inger. They were interrupted by Cranberry. Did you hear that? She asked. I think it's time we started moving again, said Rye. The group began to run into the labyrinthine tunnels, blindly following the trails the bugs had dug into the mountain depths. Rye's horn lit the way, the warm the warm orange glow providing a shield against the darkness and the horrors that lay out inside. The ponies galloped along, hoping against hope that an exit would present itself. "Inger," said Rai between breaths, "which way are we going?" "Not entirely sure," he answered, legs thudding on the tunnel surface. "We've been heading northwest for the last hour or so." "How can you tell?" asked Cranberry, flagging. "I'm a Pegasus," said Inger, as if that answered a question. I suppose because he's like Pegasus, part bird, or something. I don't know. When Cranberry tilted her head quizzically, Rai explained. "Pegasi have an innate sense of direction. Something to do with magnetic fields. Mother told me about it years ago." "Oh, hey. Yeah, I was right." By unspoken consensus, the three slowed to a brisk trot, letting the exhausted Cranberry rest. "We have a small deposit of magnetite in our foreheads," Inger filled in, "like a little compass. Pretty handy, even underground." He looked darkly around at the tunnel. It was beginning to narrow again. Cranberry looked skeptical. "Rai, you have the worst sense of direction of any pony I know. Although a lump in your head and your skull would explain a lot." "Pegacorns don't have one," he said moodily, as she dropped the subject. Inger picked up the conversation smoothly. "At any rate, we're heading roughly northwest ever since we left that large chamber. We must be far under the mountains." Cranberry groaned. "We need to be going east. We're heading the opposite direction of the pass." "Well, if you see a route east, by all means, but unless you'd like to go back to the bug chamber, we don't have much choice." She gave a little whimper. "Point taken." Her head drooped. "I have no idea where we are. All my maps." Cranberry shot a look over her shoulder. "My helmet and my supplies are gone as well." Inger looked pained at the loss, but he buried the regret with fire-winged discipline. Suddenly alarmed, he looked at Rai. "The treaties," Rai said. "Don't worry, I've got them in my saddlebags." Sure enough, they were still hung over his back. A little worse for wear from his imprisonment, but intact. Cranberry shook her head glumly. "Some of my best volumes were in those bags." "Better your life than your books, Miss Sugar." She smiled at Inger. "Call me Cranberry." He gave an acquiescent nod. "As you wish, Miss Cranberry." Cranberry laughed. "They don't make them like you anymore, Inger." The fire-wing stride grew rather prim. Rai rolled his eyes. He stumbled abruptly to a stop. Uh-oh. The tunnel was blocked. Before the trio was a featureless wall of bug resin. In the walls of the tunnel were several small crawl spaces, but they were all too tiny for a pony to fit into. The ceiling offered no escape. Dead end. Oh, horse apples. Rai stared at the wall blankly, trying to think. Cranberry flopped to the floor of the tunnel, too exhausted to care. Inger flapped his wings nervously. "I don't remember any side passages from the last mile or so," Cranberry said, still lying on the floor. "Mile? Just how far have we been running?" "A long way," said Rai absently. He put a hoof to his chin, his thoughts racing around in useless circles. Rai frowned. "Why is this here? It seems odd they stopped digging like this." "I think it's recent," said Rai. "Look at the edge, where the wall meets the tunnel." Unlike the rest of the smooth resin material they'd seen, the wall had been sealed sloppily. Globs of amber-colored goo were hardened around the wall like glue. "They set a trap, and we fell right into it." Inger whirled around, looking back into the gloom. "Then why aren't they attacking?" asked Rai. "I don't think this is a trap. I think they were trying to stop us from going down this tunnel." He tapped the hastily constructed wall. It responded with a dull clunk. Too thick to break through. Looking at the side holes, he pursed his lips and said, We're not going to fit in one of those." Inger raised his eyebrows skeptically. Rai leaned his head down into the largest of the holes. The light from his horn extended a short way down into the hole. "It's larger on the other side. A pretty tight fit, but I think I can make it if we crawl." "Oh, good," said Cranberry. "I've always wanted to take up claustrophobia as a hobby." Rai ignored her. "It looks like it curves north, parallel to the main tunnel." "I'm not so sure this is a good idea," said Inger. Cranberry stood abruptly, alarmed. "Shh! Listen! All three of them froze. They heard a faint, quiet rustling. Something far down the tunnel made a distinct chittering sound. That settles it, said Rye. Let's get in there. He reared back and smacked both hoses into the edges of the hole. It collapsed, revealing a tunnel barely half of Inger's height. Inger went in first, his small frame fitting comfortably inside. Cranberry came next, popping through the hole with a squeak. Inger looked apprehensively at the tunnel entrance. No room in there to spread his wings. He shook his head again. He was supposed to fly like a bird, not burrow like a mole. Not trying to think about all the rock pressing down on them, he crouched down and squeezed into the hole. They crawled into the darkness, inching along toward the toward the unknown, not unicorn. The air in the cramped space was stale and stuffy. Rye blinked a bead of sweat out of his eye. They had to be close to getting out. These tunnels couldn't go on forever. Or could they? Rye. Cranberry soared hoarse and faint. How much farther? Just a little further, Barry, he lied, worried. We're getting close to the end. I can feel it. Keep moving. Behind him, she moaned quietly to herself. They crawled in silence. The only noise was the scuffling of clothes and grunts from Inger whenever he encountered a particular tight bit of tunnel. Rye was starting to panic. This tunnel was never going to end. They were going to get stuck or suffocate, or the bugs would catch them, or... He was so concentrated on his fears that he failed to notice a sharp drop in the tunnel's size. He banged his head into the wall with a smack, and lost his grip on the magic. The light flashed out. He felt Cranberry bump into him from behind, pushing him into the wall. Hey, what gives? Where'd the light go? Cranberry's voice was very weak. Rye slumped in defeat. Damn. What's wrong? Inger croaked from the back. Why aren't we moving? The tunnel is too small. A small silence followed this announcement. Cranberry let out a whimper. Inger took a deep breath. We have to get back. How? You barely got through the first time, Rye stamped hoof in aimless rage. They were going to die down here. There was nothing he could do. I'm not giving up yet. Inger shifted, shoving himself backwards. Rye was too drained to fight anymore. Cranberry wasn't moving either. Come on, Rye, Miss Cranberry. He stared into the darkness at them both, waiting for them to move. Both of you, pull yourself together. We can't stay here. What's the point? Rye shook his head and closed his eyes. He leaned on the tunnel wall. Inger snorted angrily. A pity. I suppose you really are as useless as I thought, Pegacorn. Rye's eyes snapped open. How dare you? Aren't you? Then prove it. Rye realized he was being baited. Still furious, he spat. Fine. Come on, Cranberry. Okay. Cranberry managed bravely. There was a faint sliding noise as the ponies began trying to back up. Watch the hooves, Miss Cranberry. Sorry. Ouch! Rye. Was that your head? Yes? Sorry. Rye, I think I'm stuck. Just push harder, Inger. Alright, Do you feel that? The ground seemed to sag. Rye felt himself sinking. Oh, damn. The tunnel, overcome with the weight of the three ponies, finally collapsed. The floor crumbled beneath them, and they were in free fall. The tunnel had seemingly led over a cave. The three ponies hit the ground at the same time. A thick cloud of resin dust plumed around them. The fall didn't hurt. They landed on something squishy with a wet smack. The dust began to settle. I'm really getting tired of falling down holes this week, Rye thought. He picked himself up, shaking his head woozily. Every pony okay? Cranberry coughed on the dust from the rubble. Where are we? No idea. Let's get some light. Rye concentrated and his horn glowed brightly. The warm orange colored the cave around them, and Rye discovered three things. First, the cavern was big, not even close to the size of the feeding chamber, but several pony-sized houses could easily have fit inside. The other wall was faintly lit by a spell, casting the familiar color of the resin back at him. Secondly, he saw an exit. On the far side of the chamber was a large hole, big enough for Inger to fly in. It led up into the darkness. The third, he found that that between the ponies and the exit with the largest, most bloated, and hideous creature he'd ever laid eyes on. It was almost shapeless, a giant mass of dripping ichor and chitin. It was close to the size of the bakery back in Canterlot. At the front, the head of the creature were the now familiar mandibles of one of the insect things, clacking incessantly. Useless legs squirmed all along the length of the creature, scrabbling at the ground but unable to shift the enormous lump of flesh and shell. As Rye's gaze traveled down the beast's length, it found at the other end a large tube. Even as he watched, a bulge appeared and squeezed through the tube, coming to a rest on the ground below. It was a yellow-white, translucent, elongated sphere. Inside he could see something wriggling. And this reminds me a lot like Alien with the mother. Oh, Celestia. Cranberry sounded ill. Her voice drew his attention toward their hooves. Beneath them lay the smashed remains of several of the eggs. The tiny bugs inside crushed under the weight of the ponies. Rye recoiled, knocking over another one of them. They were everywhere. The cavern floor was practically covered in the things. He looked up again at the large bug. The heart of the nest. This is what they were protecting. Inger's voice was filled with revulsion. These things are abominations. Her attention drawn by the noise, the queen turned her head toward the group. Her mandibles clacked twice in rapid succession. The dreaded chittering filled the room. What do we do? Cranberry drew close to Inger. He fluffed his wings out protectively, staring around the room. Bugs began to crawl into the chamber from the holes in the wall, their slimy shells glistening in the light of the pegacorn's horn. I don't... Rye stared around. There was no way out except past the queen. We have to make a run for it. We'll never make it. Cranberry was trying to keep her terror under control, but she was practically crying. Rye just felt like curling into a ball and wishing it all away. The bugs surrounded them, drawing closer, waving their scythe arms in deadly promise. Rye reached deep into the magic. Now, more than any time before his life, he needed it. The cool trickle was there, tantalizing him with the promise of power, but not allowing him to touch the flood. Fire. 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 The ghostly specter of the forest seemed to taunt him. The bugs were nearly upon them. Cranberry closed her eyes and shielded her face with a hoof. Inger stepped in front of her and Rye, preparing to go down fighting. The hissing of the creatures was everywhere. Fire, fire, fire! Rye strained. No flame appeared. He looked up to the broken ceiling, pleading, Princess, help me! The rock above held no comfort. The rock above... The rock! Rye's face lit with a manic grin. Inger! Hit the wall! The Pegasus turned his head in bafflement. What? Do it! Inger hurled himself backwards, crashing into the wall with all his weight. At the same time, Rye bucked against it with as much strength as his exhausted muscles could manage. The bugs closed in, ready to slice into the ponies. Again! Cranberry scrambled backwards, trying to keep away from the scythe arms. Rye looked up once more in desperation. Again! He and Inger hit the wall as hard as they could. Boy the insect loomed up, bringing his scythe down on Cranberry. She pushed back, bumping into the wall. There was a low rumble. The bugs paused, their antennae twitching in confusion. Rye's smile turned predatory. Gotcha. The ceiling, weakened from the hole the ponies had ripped in when they fell from the tunnel, could no longer support the weight of the countless tunnels dug in and above it. A vast spiderweb of cracks raced along across the chamber. The first chunk of stone came free, falling like an arrow to the chamber floor. It smashed into one of the eggs, splattering it everywhere. The queen squealed in rage, her legs twitching helplessly. Run! Rye, Inger, and Cranberry rushed into the mass of bugs. Rocks began falling everywhere. The cavern collapsed. The brood found themselves under attack from their own home. The domain turned against them. Disoriented, they were pushed past and left behind. The ponies charged past through the insectoid mass, racing by the queen. She still writhed in impotent fury, screeching at the cavern filled with stone. The ponies ran, smashing eggs underhoof as the rocks fell indiscriminately on egg and insect alike. The ponies reached the tunnel, narrowly dodging a boulder the size of a cow. Keep going, shouted Rye. This whole place is coming down. They ran for their lives, pushing their bodies past their limits. The tunnel led distinctly uphill. Rye's heart lifted as they went, followed by the cracks and groans of the mountain. It sounded like the ground had come alive. They dodged rocks and carried on, Rye's horn leading the way. "Keep it up! Keep running! Don't stop for anything!" He was interrupted when a falling stone connected with the top of his head. His momentum carried him forward, and the light of his horn instantly winked out. Rye plowed into the ground, and Inger and Cranberry screeched to a halt beside him. "Oh, no, 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 no! Rye! Rye, get up!" Inger reached down and shook the pegcorn. All around them the earth roared. Rye's eyelids fluttered. Inger bit his lip. Wait, how could he see without the guiding orange glow? Inger turned his head up to the tunnel. Far in the distance, a tiny star seemed to shine through the darkness. Daylight! Rye, get out on your hooves, we're nearly there! Rye's head lolled listlessly. Inger looked around in panic as the tunnel rumbled and broke apart. Behind them came the tremendous noise of caving rock, a roar unlike anything he'd ever heard before. Cranberry stood beside him. Inger yelled over the din. "Miss Cranberry, get out, save yourself!" She shook her head. "I'm not going anywhere without you two." She kept a terrified eye around them, but she gritted her teeth, resolved. Inger grabbed the harness of Rye's saddlebags in his mouth. He dragged the limp pegcorn up the tunnel, inching toward the distant sunlight. Cranberry grabbed a hold and helped. They weren't fast enough. The roar of the falling rock had nearly reached them. Ahead, the light flickered as rocks and dust obscured their view. Inger dropped the saddlebags. He leaned close in Rye's ear. "Rye, wake up!" He took a deep breath. "The princess needs us." Rye's eyes opened slowly. Inger grabbed him again, lifting him to his hooves. "Let's get moving." Supported by Cranberry and Inger, they began hobbling toward the exit. The three ponies walked like arthritic cripples, their bodies refusing to put up with any more abuse. The light grew and grew until the star had become a gaping hole out of the caves. Blinding white light filled the gloomy dark, and the three staggered out of the tunnel. Behind them, the mountain heaved one final time, and with a long rumble, fell silent. Dust and rubble rolled out from the cave, a faint glow of dirt that was the only sign of the chaos below. The ponies collapsed onto the ground. It was covered with frost, as far as they could see. The cold, white tundra stretched out before them. Behind, the Jodor Mountains reached up into the clouds, the peaks hidden from view. The mountains flew east and west, a wall between them and Equestria. A cold wind blew past. It was snowing. Rye, Cranberry, and Inger dragged themselves together. As they lay beside each other, utterly exhausted from the events of the previous 2 days, Inger began to chuckle. "What's so funny?" Rye managed. "I'm not a sack of flour, you said," Inger wheezed. "You're not dragging me anywhere, you said." The other two lay for a moment, still gasping for breath. Cranberry began to giggle. Inger let out a chortle, and then suddenly all three of them were laughing. Tears streaming down Inger's face, and Cranberry doubled up holding her sides. Completely spent, they laughed and laughed and laughed. They laughed with the joy of being alive, of coming through hell unscathed. They laughed because they still could. And yeah, that will be it. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed it. And yeah, so have a good day, everyone.